Hi,
Hello.
Sammie.
Hi. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Okay, I think.
You're good. This will be good. This will be good. Um, Thank you to everyone for joining us. Hi, everyone. If you don't know, my name is Stephen Burke. I'm the project producer for Grain. You're tuning in to one of our um, in conversations that have been organised by this year's Masterclass programme participants. The Masterclass programme is run by Grain and also our partners, Format Festival and Quad in Derby. Um, this year we've had 15 photographers and artists take part in the programme, and the programme is a series of workshops for photographers and artists to forward their career, seek advice, find out about opportunities, and yeah, and also create content like this evening. So this evening's program is part of a series of programs that have been organised by the participants, which also includes a website where you can see everyone's work. Sammie, the name of the website?
East meets West photo. I think. I think. East meets West photo.co.uk.
Perfect. And also a publication, a newspaper publication, which is looking great as well, which contains the participants' work. But just before we go on any further, just like to say thank you to our sponsors and supporters, which is Arts Council England, Birmingham City University, Derby University, and the New Art Gallery Walsall. This evening, our main person is Sammie Masters-Hopkins. Thank you for joining us, Sammie. And just to get us started, I'm just going to read out a little introduction to Sammie, and then we're going to have a conversation about Sammie's practice, which is really interesting. And so to begin.
Super.
So Sammie is a UK-based visual artist exploring environmental politics and the complex relationship humans have to organic space. Her practice explores environmental philosophies to consider our own individual agency and why we need to stop othering ourselves to begin re-engaging with the natural world. Thank you, Sammie. Just to kind of get us started and to kind of introduce yourself to everyone, do you want to let us know how you first kind of became interested in photography or the wider arts? Yeah, where your kind of passion and where did that start?
Yeah. So this is something I've been thinking about because I kind of knew you were going to ask me. And the funny thing is, I sort of don't really have a clear-cut answer to that. So, like, I took art when I was at school and then didn't really do it when I was at college, and I kind of got into film studies instead. So, like, post A-level, I started a degree in film studies and visual arts, which didn't turn out to be for me. So I kind of got to the end of my first year of that. And then, just sort of didn't know what I was doing because I didn't go back to that course. And then sort of just had a sort of boring job for a year, and then ended up working as a technician at a sixth form college in the arts, media, film and photography department. And that, I think, is kind of where I started. I kind of realized that, photography and stuff was an option for me because I just hadn't really ever considered it before. And as part of that job, I was doing workshops with students and things. So I was I was having to teach myself a lot of stuff in order to teach students to do it, which seems a really backwards way of doing things. And so I was there for a couple of years, and that was when I sort of started just realizing that I had this interest in taking images. And weirdly, I was kind of being inspired by these students as well. And I sort of loved that they were channeling so much creative energy into image making. And so, a couple of years there, I decided I was going to go back to uni, but still didn't really think I had the skill or anything to kind of go into a photography course. So I applied back to, I think, like 4 film courses and 1 photography course, just on a whim. Kind of put all these film courses, just like, that's what I know, that's what I'm going to do. And then so I built my portfolio for this sort of photography interview that I had. And funnily, if I look back at my portfolio now, it's like nothing like the work that I make anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't force a portfolio together, but I definitely made it with the purpose of going to an interview. And then the interview just went super well. And I think basically I just got a nice ego boost and thought, oh, okay, maybe this is for me. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go to uni and I'm gonna do photography. And that's sort of where I sort of solidified my relationship with image making, if that makes sense. And then while I was at uni, I just sort of realized that I was like, I've never felt so comfortable doing something and so comfortable with kind of using something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like it becomes so kind of instinctual, doesn't it? And so now it kind of becomes an extension of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you know, I went through uni feeling really happy where I was and feeling like I was doing quite well. And I think that gave me the realization that I sort of, you know, I had some level of sort of skill in image making, and kind of here I am. So it's a very sort of whimsical way of getting into photography. You know, I don't really have the story of, you know, I picked up a camera when I was 2 and I've just been taking
There
pictures
was a
ever
beam
since.
of light on the camera, and it was holy moly.
Yeah. I mean, funny story about the first sort of film camera I had. It was given to me by my dad, but it wasn't like a family hand-me-down. It was basically one that had been left lying around his sort of workplace that was made redundant. So he was like, "Here, you can have it. That's fine."
And where did you go to university?
2016. So I was 24, I think. Yeah.
And that was at Birmingham City University.
At Birmingham City Uni. Yeah. So came to Birmingham, stayed in Birmingham. But yeah, I mean, like, arts has been in my family. You know, my sister's an artist. My dad went to art school, that kind of thing. But yeah, just in terms of my own journey here, it was very much, it just happened to me rather than me seeking it out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what when you said that, yeah, the portfolio you put together for your original interview, and you're like, oh, it's nothing what, you know, the work you're making now. What out of interest, because yeah, it's always interesting to those first images of anyone are always kind of interesting. Yeah. What were you taking pictures of?
It was a lot of studio portraits, which is something I just don't do at all now. So I kind of, as part of my training in my job at a sixth form, I went for this sort of like 1-day masterclass type thing. And that was just all on studio lighting. So all those lovely pictures went into there. And then I think my sister featured an awful lot because she was the only person I was comfortable taking pictures. Oh, Jaska's just said here, meat on a face, if I remember. But yes, so one of the portrait series that I did was, again, my sister, but I'd basically covered her whole face in meat. Yes. So it's just not the same at all. Some of it is still like really tactile. So some of the portraits I'd like printed on acetate and then like used a heat gun on, so they were really like disfigured. So there was still like that level of experimentation in there, which I still do now, but just in terms of the content. Yeah, lots of people, which I'm now terrified of. So I don't know what happened really.
I mean, you just talking about your kind of alternative processes and things like that, which is, you know, really strong part of your practice now. And as you said, kind of, you know, you were doing it then. Where does that come from? What, you know, what's the inspiration? Perhaps, I know that this is probably jumping around a bit, but yeah, do you want to talk about one of your projects where you kind of, the processes you use aren't traditional? Oh, well, they are traditional, but they're not maybe the most normal of kind of process in terms of making images.
Yeah, I mean, so like the new stuff that I'm working on now that you and Nicola have seen a little bit of is all sort of like basically black and white film developed in a plant developer. So I started using stuff that I kind of knew that worked, that I'd seen other people using. So the first couple of attempts I used a star anise developer. So basically it's like, you know, you soak your star anise in some water, you effectively make a tea, mix it with a couple of other things, and voila, you have a developer. And it's super exciting. So it's really like I love just being able to kind of take almost anything from the garden, brew up a tea with it, which everybody loves doing, and then using it as a developer to make these really lovely black and white images. And like sometimes what happens is, like when I use sage, I think I showed you these ones actually, Stephen, but when I've used sage, I've got like a really beautiful blue tone to all the black and white images. So I think like initially when I started using these plant developers, because I have not yet found a way to do this with colour film, which I would really love to be able to, but I haven't found any research on that yet. Obviously I always have to shoot in black and white, and I really do kind of miss using colour. But what you find is you get a lot of different colour tones depending on kind of what plant you are developing with. But yeah, it's a really exciting process, and I love being really tactile. Like I think that shows in some of my other projects as well. So being able to, you know, basically take whatever you want from your garden, or like at the minute I've got some broad bean pods soaking in a tea, and it's like a lovely way of just using up food you wouldn't otherwise I mean, my partner hates me because our kitchen is just full of jars of food that is soaking because I'm gonna try using it.
So what are the different types of, you know, what are the different types of things you've used as developers and as part of the process?
So what have I used so far? I've used dried hibiscus and dried star anise, and then I decided I wanted to try stuff a little bit closer to home. So I just used gorse flower, which, like, if you've ever been to Sutton Park, is just everywhere, and that doesn't need drying. So yeah, I've used some of that, which actually turned out to be one of the best in terms of like clarity. One of the best developers that I've used, and some dried thyme and some dried sage. What else have I used? I think that's where I'm up to at the minute. So I've done like a couple of tests with everyone, because I used fresh thyme to begin with, and that just didn't seem to give the strength required. So then I just tried a dried one, and that worked so much better. But yeah, so you just mix this tea with soda crystals, which you can use for cleaning, and vitamin C powder, which when I was trying to find it, was sold out everywhere. So I'm assuming everyone has some of that at home.
And for you, why have you been exploring these kind of alternative processes? What's drawn you to kind of explore this as part of your practice?
So I think initially it was what I could get my hands on. So I started doing it kind of during lockdown. I didn't really know if like labs were open for development. Like, it turns out most of them were, but I didn't know that at the time. And it was very much just a case of using what I could get and what I did have to keep making work, you know, whilst I couldn't really go out. So that was kind of one element of it, but also kind of about like making like photography a much more sustainable practice, because actually when you think about analog photography, as much as I love it, it almost goes against a lot of kind of the concept of my work. So obviously, like, I kind of look into environmental policy and like environmental practice, and actually analog film is so far removed from all of that, because, you know, a standard film pretty much always has animal byproduct in. You know, they don't really reuse canisters, so that just gets chucked away. Chemicals are pretty toxic, which isn't great. So there was that element to it as well. But kind of as I've been developing it, what I really like the idea of is it just becoming more accessible to, you know, anyone and everyone. Like, rather than being confused by complicated chemicals, why not be able to go out into your garden, pick a handful of weeds, and kind of be able to make images from that? So like, you can do it without necessarily using film. So you can, you know, like do photograms and stuff. Just blend up your weeds, put it onto paper, and leave it out in some sunlight for a little while, and you can kind of start making your own images that way. So yeah, I really like, obviously the sustainability aspect is wonderful for me and my practice, but just in terms of opening that up to other people and making image making a much more accessible practice, especially in an analog, you know, slower, non-digital on iPhone kind of way.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that leads us on maybe to talk about one of your early projects in terms of the environment and how, well, the first project that Nicola and I saw of your work, which was part of your graduate show, The Enigma of Experience, which is a great title. Again, looking, you know, your work looking at the environment. Do you want to talk everyone through what that project's about?
Yeah, so I'd kind of, by the time I'd got to sort of making this final project for my degree, I'd obviously realised that sort of environmental aspects were something that were important to me and something I wanted to channel through my work. But what I kind of decided was that I wanted a little bit more like scientific context, and I kind of wanted just sort of a stronger background. So, you know, I can research all of this as much as I like, but I'm not a scientist. So I kind of wanted just something a bit stronger underlying my work. So I found the Birmingham Institute of Forestry Research, which is where that project is made entirely, and it is a wonderful, super interesting forest space that is kind of equally wild and equally kind of maintained. It's a really sort of strange dynamic, because in terms of like how they have to run, they kind of can't let anything new come in, so it's all sort of like fenced up, but everything inside is also just left to kind of grow and roam and be as free as it needs to be. So basically what they do there is they have big massive gas cylinders in different areas of the forest, and they pump CO2 levels into these gas cylinders, but it's at different levels depending on what area of the forest it's in. And then they basically monitor the ecosystem in that particular space to see what effect the different level of CO2 has. So they'll do things like collect, you know, dead insects and leaves and dew and rainfall and soil samples and literally anything else you can think of. It gets collected, it gets measured. So the idea there is, I think they said that they kind of plan to do it for sort of a 10-year projection, so that they can kind of see what the impact of these different CO2 levels has over that 10-year period. So that was kind of the scientific basis for the project that I started. And so I started going to this forest. It was sort of like once a week, once every 2 weeks, taking photos, kind of being unsure of what it was I was going to get out of it. But kind of as the project went along, I sort of realized I didn't want to just make a documentary project. That was something I did know. And I didn't necessarily want it to be sort of like a driven and focused to a point project. So I wasn't really working towards one particular kind of area, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't think I know exactly what this book is going to look like by the time I've taken all the photos, or kind of that kind of thing. So what it became was just a collection of images that I was taking when I was going every week. And like some weeks I would turn up, I would maybe not really take that many images, but I would sort of have a book with me, so I would sit and kind of read, that kind of thing. So kind of the images in that project are just built up of a kind of a collection of moments of me being there and what I felt I wanted kind of instinctively to take a photo of while I was there. Mm-hmm. And then included in that project, there's some archive images as well, which were basically given to me by the guys that were there, because they had this massive box of photographic like equipment that was basically from an old geology department. No one knew what to do with it, and they were going to throw it away. And I was like, please don't do that. That's just sacrilege. I will take the whole lot off your hands, and I will basically figure out what to do with it. I'll either find a new home for it or I'll use it myself. And anyway, so they had these little slide images in there that were just super, super beautiful. And so because the project was becoming just about my experience being there and kind of a collection of all these images already, I decided to include them, because it kind of just that moment just became part of kind of my experience being there. So as the project went on, I just realized that, you know, what I was trying to do was get across sort of in images my experience of that space. And so I began to think about how actually as artists we can try and do that, but in the end, does the audience not just put their own ideas onto images anyway? So that's when the project became a little bit more tactile. So if you just bear with me 1 second, I will just show you a couple of like pieces that I made.
Please do.
So yeah, so I made these little collection of glass ceramic tiles. Kind of find a nice one. I don't know how clear it is to see this.
Yes.
Yeah. And I handed them out to people, and I got them. So these are all images that I've taken at the forest, and I just got people to carry them around with them, and I was just intrigued to see, like, as to whether having like a token with an image on changes the way you feel about the image if you have it with you all the time. So like for a lot of people it just became something that was in their pocket that they sort of started playing with. Other people sort of became, you know, sort of disinterested and not bothered, and it sat in the bottom of a bag somewhere. A few people, if I have an example of this one, took them out and showed them to other people, which was quite nice, and then marked on the back how many people they showed it to. So these kind of became little photographic objects themselves. But it was just a way of considering how images and how we take images can be translated to other people. So there was quite a lot going on in that project, to be honest. That's sort of the kind of the quickest way.
No, it's great, really strong work. And just, you know, for people who haven't seen that work, yeah, please go on to Sammie's website, which is slmhopkins.com. Yeah, and you can see all of Sammie's work on there. It's all really good. But yeah, that was the work we first saw of you, and you know, Sammie won a Grain Mentoring Award from that, so it's really strong work, and you know, it's been really great to work with you over the last year and see how your work's developing.
Yeah, I feel like I've spoke about that project so many times that I've almost forgotten how to talk about that project now. The more I talk about it, the more I'm like, there was too much in there. What's going on? I don't know how to condense that enough. But it's a great piece. And also, if anyone is still interested in that space, Claire Hewitt is doing a project there, and you should just absolutely go and have a look at it because it's incredible. Just a quick plug for Claire there because I really love the project.
Yeah. And Claire, and another plug for Grain, that project again, supported by Grain, which is great. Yeah, and Claire's work is really interesting, and the stuff coming out of that is great. So that's Claire Hewitt, if people want to have a look at her work and, you know, the stuff she's doing there. I think what's really interesting again about your work, and, you know, seeing how things are developing, or, you know, how you know, the physicalness of the photography to you plays such an important role, especially in the kind of presentation of the work.
Yeah.
And then a piece of work that we've been talking about recently with you is the work that's frozen and is a durational piece. I don't know if you want to let everyone know about it. There's Claire.
So the ice work, so that was the project I did just before the final major project, and some of it actually did fit in. So the images that I took for that project were from the forest, the research forest, and so I was kind of just trying to experiment with ways that I could work with imagery in a new way. I mean, you know, working with ice, obvious connotations of, you know, sort of glacial melting and all that kind of thing, but I basically ended up freezing small images into blocks of ice, maybe about kind of this size. And then as kind of part of an exhibition, I hung them from the ceiling. I had a box underneath them, and basically just throughout sort of the exhibition event, the block of ice would just melt. It would then kind of reveal the image kind of a little bit clearer. And then eventually the whole thing would just disintegrate and fall into the little pool of water in the box. And so sort of the idea to that was basically about kind of relinquishing control of a project and allowing the work to produce the outcome on its own, if that kind of does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I kind of I have absolutely no control over how, you know, the duration at which the ice melts. I mean, I can, if I want it to slow down, I can make the ice thicker, but that's really the only engagement I can have. Or, you know, so like the speed at which it melts or the way in which it falls. So the way I hung them for the exhibition that we did was to just have 2 pieces of fishing wire in each corner. So some of them beautifully melted nice and evenly, and then it kind of just crashed into the bottom. Whereas some of them ended up kind of like falling to one side, and they would kind of swing, miss the box completely and fall on the floor. So yeah, so that was kind of about considering like control in artwork, basically. But again, you know, keeping sort of environmentalism as a concern in my work. I think sort of the idea of trying to control our natural surrounding, which is something I think we're trying to do, doesn't necessarily work all that well. Like I think we can do everything we can, but kind of in the way we sort of currently live, that it's just not, you know, that's kind of not going to work. Does that make sense? It's actually, it's a really hard project to talk about without being able to show it, because that's not on my website either, so no one's really, that's work that's not really seen. I think there's a short video on my Instagram somewhere, but yeah. So
but conceptually, it's really, you know, it's really strong, and yeah, I think it's. What were the actual images of? What were the images that you froze, and what were they?
So the images that were in the ice were from the same forest that I shot Enigma of Experience at, but they were a little bit more like documentary style. So they were quite clean images. Quite a lot of them were of the like equipment and apparatus that they used in the forest for data collection and that kind of thing. So there was sort of a somewhat of a contrast between sort of me looking at sort of the natural world and how we're currently trying to control it, and the fact that in order to do that we have to have all of this kind of man-made machinery to further our knowledge of what's happening to it, and how we kind of move forward from it, which is why, yeah, most of those particular sort of more of machinery rather than of trees and plants in the sky and lovely things like that. Yeah. So
I'm just gonna move slightly because I just need to plug my things gone off my charging.
Oh, no worries.
Just moving just slightly. So apologies. Sorry, I nearly ended the whole thing then as well. Can you see me? Yeah. But yeah, I think what's really exciting, sorry, there we go, about your work and the way it's developing is this, that the process of the work is so integral to what you're trying to communicate, and I think that's really interesting. And how do you see the work, potentially developing that participants are involved in the process, especially when you talk about the the potential for the alternative processes, and that then they're being very accessible to anybody?
Yeah, so I have this sort of idea in mind that I don't quite know how it's going to flourish yet, but it's here. So at the minute, my kind of idea is to have some kind of like allotment plot, basically, in which I can grow everything that I would need in order to develop. So, I would be taking everything from seed to full plant, which would then be picked and used. And like, I would just love to kind of get more of a community involvement in that. So I don't know whether it would be sort of hosting workshops, or if it would be, getting people involved that are already at the allotment. They would just maybe want to help me grow stuff, or maybe they would have some kind of idea of what would grow. But yeah, so I would kind of like to expand it to, yeah, to kind of the community. Like, I would love to hold workshops to, you know, not necessarily just to photographers that want to be able to make plant developers, but, you know, to anyone that has an interest in image making. Because like I said, you can do it as just a photogram, so you get like beautiful shapes of just whatever you're, you know, you're putting on top of your page. So yeah, definitely kind of want to grow everything myself. Yeah, and kind of have a bit more community involvement in it, because I think actually, especially after we've all been trapped inside and kind of been on our own a little bit too much, I think probably in terms of like mental well-being, it would be really nice to kind of have an open outside space which people could come in and just sort of have a little go. And because there's, I think one of the things that draws a lot of people to photography is just, it's almost the magic of it. I know that sounds really like naive and whimsical and like I've only just discovered that photography is a thing, but like, you know, like imagine the first time you've been in a dark room, for anyone that has been in a dark room, like just seeing a photo appear is, it's just so wonderful, and you like, you take ownership of it, and you just think like, I managed to produce that from something that I saw through the camera that I, you know, I took the picture on. And then you've even managed to turn it into a physical, tangible, tactile object yourself. And I think, you know, I think that's something that expands past people that are already in love with photography. I think, like, you know, there's just a community of people out there that would love to just try it and kind of fall in love with it.
For sure, definitely. And especially if you're growing it as well. You know,
Yeah, I have this sort of really naive idea that I can just produce it all myself.
We've just had a couple of, so Joanna's just said she's got an allotment and she can help. She can recommend, you know, some things
okay.
for you, which would be good.
Yes, great. I've tried going onto allotment websites, and I don't know if anyone has, but they're basically like the first websites that were ever made. And I can find no information on them because it's like being on a computer about 17 years ago.
Maybe that should be part of the project.
Maybe it should be. Maybe.
Jessica has said there's a community garden being built in Handsworth. It could be people to get in touch with.
Yeah, super. I'm going to get a pen and write these things down, guys. Thank you.
And we've got a question about the you know, the process. Have you found if it works better with dried or wet plants / ingredients?
So from what I've tried, dried works better. So when I did like the thyme, I did it with fresh thyme and it just wasn't strong enough. And then I tried it with a dried version of thyme and it worked really super well. Hang on, maybe I might have an example of it just behind me. Bear with me. You may or may not be able to see this because the light is probably not in the right place. I kind of need a torch. Can't quite see it.
You need a light box.
I do. Hang on. Let's see if this works. It's made. But yeah, so dried works better. So I've got some orange peel that's kind of brewing at the moment, and I've dried that out first because I've just found that dried works much better. When I did my sage experiment, I did a mix just because I had not enough of either one of them, and that seemed to work perfectly fine. But yeah, as far as I'm aware at the minute, dried stuff works better. Hang on.
Sounds like you need to do a cookbook. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? Hang on. Can we see now? Does this work any better on my hands?
Yes, kind of.
Kind of. It's not great. I need a screen share. I can't do it on here.
That's okay. Don't worry.
But yes, no. So actually, Claire, you know, on the last Eats Meets West, I can never say that. There's too many S's. I'm so sorry. Masterclass. I spoke to Claire, and she also said that I should do a cookbook or a little sort of mock cooking show type thing. Which is not a thing.
So, I know, yeah. I mean, I've seen your sketch, your kind of digital sketchbook, which is brilliant, and I think you should share it with everyone to see because it, you know, it looks great. But yeah, that feels very kind of, yeah, like, yeah, like recipes. It looks like recipes.
It is. It's written down exactly as
Yeah.
recipes. Yeah, yeah.
When did you you know, obviously at first you're researching, you know, these different processes, but now have you got to a point where you kind of understand what will work or what won't work depending on, I don't know, our citrus fruits
Yeah,
and
right. So, yeah, this is
potatoes
something I'm desperately trying to get my head around. From what I gather, it's about caffeic acid, which I initially thought, because the really popular caffeinol developer, which is what a sort of natural developer is called, is coffee. So I think you've probably seen coffee be used much more. And so when I read that it was caffeic acid that is what you need, I assumed that was relevant to caffeine. Tea will definitely work, and like, I don't know, maybe I could try it with like Coca-Cola or you know, like something like that. Like, I just presumed that it was anything that had a caffeine level in, so I thought maybe peppermint tea. But I have since learned that caffeic acid has nothing to do with caffeine. So like, that was all, that was all completely not helpful information that I came across. So yeah, caffeic acid, which is a phenol, which is some kind of something. I don't know. I'm trying really hard to understand it, and I am not. The science part of me is not good. But yeah, so it's called phenols, which are what you're really after. And basically, different plants they all have it, but it's just depending on the level. And I've kind of been trying to research to see if I can find some kind of list or some kind of pattern to see whether it is apparent more in, like you say, citrus, or you know, in kind of brassica plants or whatever. And I haven't come across that list yet, which is why I'm sort of just trying anything and everything to see if I can almost come up with that list myself, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of just trying whatever I've got whenever I can try it. And I will basically just sort of try and come up with that list on my own until oh, sorry, I've got a little fly in my face. Sorry. It was really distracting. Yeah, until I can either come across a list that does exist, or you know, something that is whatever, I can make it myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just touched on then about the kind of experience of East meets West, the Masterclass program, and the kind of feedback you've been getting from the artists and creators and festival directors and writers who've kind of come in and led the sessions. How have you found the kind of the process of the program?
It's the whole program is great. I would recommend it to anyone. Every time I have to talk about my work, it makes me feel a little bit sick. So I think that has been one of the biggest sort of experiences I've got, in that I've had to do it repeatedly. And one of the other kind of massive benefits is just all the other people that are on the program as well. They're all just super inspiring in their own way. So I think everyone's work is really different from one another's, but just in terms of like how people approach their practice and how people approach their work, and you know, how people talk about their work, all that kind of stuff that I've been surrounded by in every masterclass, it's just led to something that I can take away. And you know, all of the speakers that have been there have been just really, really great to talk to. I missed the first one, which I was kind of sad about. But yeah, no, otherwise it's an all-round great kind of, it seems to touch base on so many things. So, you know, we've obviously had writers coming in and talking and giving feedback, and we've had practitioners. And I feel like we've had so much advice on so many areas of the industry. So I think probably a lot of other people were sort of carrying projects through and getting advice on projects that they were currently working on, whereas I, at the time when we started, wasn't necessarily working on anything new, so I was kind of getting feedback on older work. Yeah, and so actually one of the things I kind of took from it, so I was always showing that big grad show kind of work, that my end of uni work that felt so massive to me at the time. And I think I've had great feedback from it and it's been amazing. But actually I kind of feel like what I've taken is that doesn't necessarily have to be where I stop or the only thing I can keep showing. Like I can go back to work that I made before that, and it's not necessarily like I'm going. Does that make sense?
100%. I think, you know, should say this is like Sammie's first year out of university.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a strange time period.
Yeah.
To really kind of really understand what your practice is about, where you want to take it. You know, as I said earlier, you know, your work I think has, you know, moved on a lot in terms of, you know, your thinking of it being like every single part of it is important, and you know, this kind of the brewing of the processing mixes and things like that, and that being you know, how you know, your kind of how you want to speak about the environment, you know. Yeah, I think it's really strong. Where was I going with this? I was going to say something and then I did. But yeah, I think when you leave university, it's a really strange time, and especially just kind of reevaluating your work. And like you said, you think like this, you do this big project, you're like, okay, God, this, you know, I have to hang everything on this. But actually, it's freeing to really, you don't.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I definitely felt a little bit sort of hooked on it. Like I don't know how to move past it, and I don't know, you know, I don't know how to sort of appreciate old work I did anymore, and I don't know how to start new work anymore because no one's telling me I have to. So it was kind of moving, talking about it, but equally just finding out I could move past it. Which was really great.
And obviously you have, you know, you have been able to start new work, and I suppose the process of hearing from all the different speakers and, you know, all the participants, like you said, you know, that's inspiring to see what other people are doing. And also, again, you know, really difficult when you go to university to kind of find another peer group almost, and hopefully, you know, that's one of the ideas of the program. You know, it creates another kind of peer group for everyone to kind of, you know, work together or bounce ideas off each.
It's kind of people to have those conversations with, because, you know, I can ramble on about my work to my family as much as I like, but they're going to get bored of it eventually. So it's kind of just finding that kind of group of people to just continue having those conversations with. And I think that's genuinely one of the greatest things that I've taken from it. I think, you know, I've not come out with a, like, I don't know, like a whole new finished, completed project or anything like that. But I've definitely come through it understanding my own process and being able to take a step back from sort of an educational perspective. And I'm kind of learning how to, you know, be in this industry without, you know, being part of a degree, and just kind of doing it on my own and kind of seeing how other people are managing that is really nice. And, you know, actually one of the great things is realizing that everybody else is juggling a lot of things. And I think, like, deep down we all know everybody has to do it, but it's so hard to see it when you're just following it on social media. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see all these people that I think are like super successful and super wonderful, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm sat on a table with you guys. But like, you're also juggling several things, and that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And speaking to more people and breaking down those kind of, you know, barriers of what it appears people are doing and the reality of it is really important. And one of the key things from the program, and, you know, how the speakers, you know, talk about, you know, the realities of their practice and life.
Yeah, like in terms of all the speakers we've got in, everybody that has kind of spoken to us has been so honest and sort of genuine and humble about how they've got to where they've got to. Yeah, it just makes such a difference to hear that actually coming from the mouths of the people that are doing it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And I think maybe that's a good place to finish. But I think, it's really exciting where your practice is going, and I hope you get the allotment. And I think, that could be a real sensor of, really pushing, the participatory element of the work, which I think would be really interesting and exciting. And obviously,
Yeah.
Work
Yeah.
that's really kind of exciting at the moment.
It is, yeah. I'm kind of trying to find a little context for it myself at the moment, so I can kind of have my own project out of it too. But I feel like it's something, community involvement would work perfectly in. Yeah, so fingers crossed. I don't know how long a waiting list in Birmingham is for an allotment, so I could be waiting a few months, but we can just try. If I can try and get onto one when I figured out their website, so who to talk to. I probably have to send a letter or something.
If anyone does have any tips, please message Sammie.
Thanks.
But thanks a lot, Sammie. That was really great, and great to hear more about your work and kind of, your process, and sharing the kind of how you're making this new work. This is the final one in this program of talks is on Thursday with Mitchell Moreno, who's a brilliant artist and photographer. Yeah. And I believe Laura is talking to Mitchell, but I could be wrong. It is Laura. So Laura O'Leary from Format will be discussing Mitchell Moreno's work. But yeah, it's been, if you've missed any of the other interviews or conversations even, they're all on the East Meets West website, I believe, or they will be soon. So you can catch up on all the discussions with all the fantastic artists and photographers.
They're all on the IGTV section at the moment on Instagram.
Perfect, Sammie. And also coming up, there's the East Meets West online photo cafe, which is on the 16th of August, I believe, but you can find more details about that on the Grain website. So some of the participants will be speaking a bit more about the collaborative element of the program and how they've worked together to create the website and the newspaper. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Sammie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And yeah, thank you. And we'll see you all on Thursday for the final one. But yeah, thanks guys. Cheers, Sammie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.